Hello, friends. Today, I'm here with a story I read that touched me. Don't forget to subscribe. Enjoy your viewing. Most people believe that power is something inherited or stolen in broad daylight, but they are wrong. True power is found in the things people throw away, the secrets whispered in empty hallways at 3 a.m., and the mess they are too proud to clean up themselves. My name is Elias Thorne, and 6 months ago, I was a ghost in a blue jumpsuit, a man who existed only in the peripheral vision of the elite, scrubbing the porcelain thrones of Ethelgard Global. Today, I sit on the only throne that matters in this building. To understand how a man moves from the janitor's closet to the CEO's penthouse in half a year, you must understand that I wasn't just cleaning floors, I was conducting an unintended audit of the world's most powerful people. I was the invisible man, the one who saw the panic in the crumpled-up memos, the desperation in the empty scotch bottles left in the trash, and the mathematical errors left on whiteboards by exhausted analysts who thought no one was looking. For 7 years, I was part of the night shift. I arrived when the sun went down, and the ambitious young lions of the financial world headed to their expensive lofts. I had a master's degree in quantitative economics from a prestigious university that had collapsed during the 2008 crisis, leaving me with a mountain of debt and a resume that no one would touch because of a legal technicality involving my former employer's bankruptcy. So, I took the only job I could find. I became a janitor. But while my hands were busy with bleach and ammonia, my mind was hungry. I would spend my breaks reading the discarded research reports from the high-yield bond desk. I would study the complex algorithms left on the glass walls of the conference rooms. I knew which mergers were going to fail 3 weeks before the board did, simply because I could smell the stress in the sweat left on the chairs and see the frantic, corrected figures in the waste blings. I was the most overqualified observer in the history of London's financial district, a silent architect of dust, waiting for the world to crumble just enough for me to step through the cracks. The turning point was a Tuesday that smelled like impending rain and ozone. The markets were in a state of hyper-volatility, and Ethelgard Global was at the center of a predatory short-selling attack. Marcus Sterling, the CEO, a man whose ego was larger than the gross domestic product of most small nations, had stayed late. When I entered the penthouse floor at midnight, the air was thick with the scent of expensive cigars and failure. I found Sterling not behind his desk, but collapsed on the floor, his hand clutching his chest, his face the color of wet ash. The office was a tomb of silence. No security was on that floor at that hour, and the private elevator required a biometric scan he couldn't provide in his state. I could have just called an ambulance and walked away, but I saw his computer screen. It was flashing red. Ethelgard was hemorrhaging liquidity. A rival firm, Blackwood Holdings, had triggered an automated sell-off that was designed to bankrupt Sterling's company by the time the London Stock Exchange opened at 8 a.m. I knelt beside him, checked his pulse, it was thready but there, and dialed the emergency services. But as I waited for the operator to pick up, I looked at the terminal. I saw the logic of the attack. It was beautiful in its cruelty, a recursive loop that exploited a tiny flaw in Ethelgard's risk management software. If I did nothing, 40,000 people would lose their jobs by noon, and Sterling would wake up, if he woke up at all, a ruined man. I didn't think about the illegality of it. I didn't think about my jumpsuit. I thought about the math. I knew the CTO's password because I had watched him type it 1,000 times while I was polishing the glass partition behind him. I sat in the CEO's chair, the leather still warm from his dying reign, and I began to type. I didn't just stop the bleed, I inverted the position. I used the company's remaining reserves to buy into the very volatility the rivals were creating, turning the short seller's trap into a liquidity vacuum that sucked the capital right back out of Blackwood's accounts. When the paramedics arrived, I was back on my knees, performing CPR. They never looked at the computer. They never looked at me as anything other than the help. "Good job, mate," one of them said as they wheeled Sterling away. "You might have saved his life." I just nodded, picked up my mop, and finished the floor. I left the office at 5 a.m., my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I knew that when the sun rose, the financial world would wake up to a miracle. Ethelgard hadn't just survived, it had made a profit of $900 million in 4 hours of automated trading. The board of directors convened an emergency meeting at 9 a.m. They were looking for the genius, the shadow trader, who had executed the most sophisticated hedge in the history of the firm. They checked the logs, expecting to see Sterling's digital signature. Instead, they saw a series of commands that bypassed every security protocol, executed from a terminal that was supposed to be locked. The investigation was swift. Julian Vane, the head of operations, a man who treated janitors like ghosts, called me into the boardroom 2 days later. He looked confused, his expensive silk tie slightly crooked. He played the security footage. It showed the room was empty, then it showed me entering with a bucket, then it showed me sitting at the desk for 3 hours, my eyes fixed on the monitors, my fingers flying across the keys with a precision that no janitor should possess. "Who are you?" Vane asked, his voice trembling, with a mix of fear and awe. I didn't hide anymore. I told him about my degree. I told him about the flaws I had seen in their logic over the last 7 years. I told him that the CFO was embezzling funds through a shell company in Cyprus, something I discovered by piecing together shredded documents from the 3rd floor. I told him that if they fired me, I would take my logic to their rivals and Ethelgard would be dead within a month. They didn't fire me. They couldn't. Sterling was in a medically induced coma, and the shareholders were demanding to know who the savior of Ethelgard was. The board, terrified of a stock price collapse, made a radical, desperate decision. They couldn't admit a janitor had saved them, so they discovered me. They announced that I had been a deep-cover corporate consultant, hired by Sterling to stress-test their systems from the inside. It was a lie that saved their reputation and launched my career. I was given a suit that cost more than my previous annual salary. I was given an office with a view of the Thames. But more importantly, I was given the authority to fix what was broken. I moved through the company like a wildfire. I fired the corrupt executives whose trash I had been taking out for years. I promoted the quiet, brilliant analysts who were being ignored by their arrogant supervisors. I knew who was actually working and who was just performing, because I had seen their desks at 4 a.m. for a decade. The rise was meteoric. Every trade I touched turned to gold. Every strategy I implemented outperformed the market. I wasn't guessing. I was using the total, unfiltered knowledge of the building's internal life. By the time Marcus Sterling woke up and walked back into the office, his cane clicking against the marble floors I used to wax, he found a world he didn't recognize. He walked into the penthouse office, ready to reclaim his throne, only to find me sitting there, reviewing the quarterly earnings that had tripled under my short tenure. He looked at me, his eyes narrowing, as he recognized the man who used to clean his toilet. "You," he spat, the word dripping with venom You're the help. You're a fluke. You don't belong in this chair. I didn't get angry. I didn't even stand up. I simply slid a folder across the desk. It contained the evidence of his own negligence, the hidden debts he had accrued, and the board's unanimous vote to appoint me as the permanent CEO. Marcus, I said, my voice as calm as the night shifts I used to work. You looked at me for 5 years and never saw a human being. You saw a tool, and that is why you failed. You thought the foundation of this company was the glass and the steel, but the foundation is the people you ignored. I know this company better than you ever will, because I've seen it from the bottom up. I've cleaned its wounds, and now I'm the one healing them. Sterling left that day and never returned. The story of the Janitor CEO became a legend, a modern-day myth that transformed the culture of the city. I didn't change who I was, though. I still keep my old blue jumpsuit in a glass case behind my desk. It reminds me that the difference between the person cleaning the floor and the person owning the floor is often just a matter of who is paying attention. I am Elias Thorne, and I am no longer a ghost. I am the man who proved that if you want to rule the world, you first have to be willing to clean it. Under my leadership, Ethelgard Global didn't just become a financial powerhouse. It became a symbol of radical transparency. I implemented a policy where every senior executive had to spend 1 week a year working a manual labor job within the firm. They hated it at first, but the results were undeniable. Empathy increased, waste decreased, and for the first time in history, the people at the top actually understood what was happening at the bottom. I never forgot the smell of the cleaning fluid. It stayed in my nostrils as a reminder of where I came from. I spent my weekends visiting the night shifts, bringing coffee to the men and women in blue jumpsuits, listening to them, because I knew that among them was the next Elias Thorne, another genius waiting for a rainy Tuesday and a crack in the system. My career didn't just rise, it exploded, not because of luck, but because I was the only person in the room who had nothing to lose and everything to observe. The world is full of invisible people with the power to change everything. I was just the first one to stop being a ghost and start being a king. As the years passed, the Thorne method became a standard in business schools across the globe. It wasn't about the math, though the math was flawless. It was about the perspective. I had seen the underbelly of corporate greed and the quiet dignity of those who keep the world turning. I turned Ethelgard into a fortress of stability because I knew exactly where the cracks usually started, in the small, overlooked places. When I finally retired 25 years later, I didn't leave my office to a standing ovation in the lobby. Instead, I went down to the basement, grabbed a mop, and cleaned the lobby floor one last time. As I worked, the new CEO, a woman I had mentored since she was an intern, came down and stood beside me. She didn't say a word. She just picked up a cloth and started polishing the brass railing. In that moment, I knew that my legacy wasn't the billions of dollars in the bank, but the simple truth that no one is ever truly invisible if they have the courage to see themselves. The janitor's closet was long gone, replaced by a gym, but the spirit of the man who worked there remained, a silent architect of a better world, built from the dust of the old one. I look back at that rainy Tuesday often. I think about Marcus Sterling's heart and the red flickering screen. If I hadn't been there, if I had been 5 minutes late, or if I had decided that it wasn't my problem, the world would be a different place. But that's the secret of the universe. It's held together by the people who show up when no one is watching. It's held together by the cleaners, the drivers, the night watchmen, and the ghosts. I was just the one who decided to sit in the chair. And as I walked out of the building for the final time, the sun rising over a city I had helped reshape, I realized that the greatest promotion I ever received wasn't becoming CEO. It was the moment I realized that I was already a leader when I was still holding a mop. The title was just the world finally catching up to the reality I had created in the dark.